Hi class. So one thing you come across when dealing with texture mapping is something called texture wrap mode. And it seems to confuse a lot of people, so I'm going to go over it in its own little video here, but it's actually really simple. So that's the good news. So here's the thing. Imagine I have some texture. This is my S, this is my T, and inside this I have some kind of, doesn't matter, some kind of texture doing something. I'll put a happy face in there. Well, it doesn't matter, I have a texture. Now what happens? What happens in the following situation? If we have a U and a V bigger than 1. Less than 0. Now remember that the ST space is only defined between 0 and 1. So if I pick a U and a V out here somewhere, way out in the boonies, bigger than 1 in both dimensions, what do? It's undefined. So we need to map that out of bounds U and V back into the valid. This has to get mapped back into the valid S and T somehow. So this is what texture wrap mode is. It tells the computer what happens if they give me a U and V that's illegal, it's invalid. What should I do? It doesn't crash. It'll never crash in this situation. But we can tell it what we want to do. And even better, we can tell it what to do on a per texture basis. So we set this mode, the solution, per texture. And there's basically 3 flavors. If you look this up, there's a lot of variants. But there's basically 3 flavors that explains everything. The first one is called clamp. And clamp, I'm not sure why they chose that name, but all that it means is it limits it to 0 and 1. Right? So if it'll go, okay, my U corrected is my max, the bigger of 0 and U. So if U is less than 1, it's 0. And the smaller of 1 and U. So if U is bigger than 1, it brings it down. So if I go into negative territory, it clamps it to the edges. That's all that clamp means. So in this case, if I clamp this pixel, I'd get 1, 1. Okay? Excuse me. Now this is useful. Clamping is quite useful when your edge is generic. So if you have a texture here, just like in my example, and you have all this white space buffering the edge, you don't mind if it goes over a bit. If the texture coordinates are off a bit and you have a bit of extra white space, nobody will even notice. However, if you have a texture that has, like a mountain scene, like this, where they're not matching, clamping this last line like that will look fishy, it will look funny. Because remember, any point out here gets clamped to the edge. So when you draw the texture, it stretches out that last row of pixels. Okay, so it's not what you want in that situation. But with a generic border, clamp is great. Another option we see is repeat, which what this does, instead of limiting, it basically starts over again on the other side. So loops around. What it does is it uses a fractional point, the fractional part of your coordinate. So if I come back up here, if this red point, if this was 1.5, 1.5, it'll only use the fractional part. So 1.5, 1.5 will just become 0.5, 0.5. So as that number increases, it'll just keep lapping around your texture, and it'll repeat it. So this is very useful for tiled things like a tiled floor or brickwork. So you just one small texture and just give U out into infinity and V out into infinity, and it'll tile your texture perfectly, because when it maps it to S and T space, it'll just take the fractional part no matter how big you get. The last one I'll mention is mirror. Now mirror is basically like repeat, but you go backwards for every second one. So I go out, I go back, I go out, I go back. So I'll get my image flipped. I'll get it flipped back, I'll get it flipped. So it's kind of like, I always imagine having like a flipping tile which flips over and flips over and flips over again. Okay, so mirror just repeats, but every second is mirrored. It's also good for certain kinds of tiles. Imagine a cobblestone floor where you want to have stones that are, have a diamond pattern or a checkerboard pattern. You just like reverse, 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 and you'll get a really nice pattern out of it. So you can use this in setting up your scenes. Let's go take a look at a slide. Here we go. Yeah, so this is texture mode example. So here, this one here, we can see where my mouse is on the top. This is clamp. Okay, so clamping an X, a U, and clamping in T. Really neat. So you can do that. So the last row of pixels, which apparently are the opposite or of what you, it's not the white pixel there, it's the red clearly, they get dragged and stretched the whole way. The same thing goes in the other direction. Okay, but the angle, you clamp X, you clamp Y, this must be a white pixel up there. Now, or depending on the renderer, the clamp outside of these directions could remain unshaded. You'd need to check that out. Now what you can do, which is really cool, is you can mix and match repeat. So the one on the right here is repeat. I just repeat, repeat, repeat in every dimension. This one, I say, look, in this dimension I repeat, in this dimension I clamp. This is the opposite. In U I repeat, in V I clamp. So you can mix and match, and if you look up an OpenGL spec, you can see all kinds of variants of repeat and clamp and mirror and so forth. Now remember what I said about clamping looking good for things that have generic borders but not for things that don't? This clamping here looks funny, the checkerboard. It's probably not what you expect if you clamp it to the edge, because you have this funny edge that you don't really typically want to repeat. But in the texture like the bottom here with this character, because it's padded in a generic space, clamp looks just fine. If you're positioning this character on an object and you make a mistake, or depending on the engine you have extra space, and you add a few extra pixels, no one's going to notice a bit of extra white or generic sections. Okay, so this is an example where clamp does just fine. This is repeat and this is mirror. Every second one mirrors. You mirror this way. One of the tricks with mirror is that you're mirroring in the dimension, right? In X you're mirroring this way, or I should say U. In V you're mirroring the other way. Then you mirror both, and you finally get back to where you were. Okay, so that's all I wanted to really talk about that. When you do textures, you will have to set the mode. For most of us, we just use clamp because your textures are going to fit anyway, but you should be aware that you do have other options available to you.